Try naming a recent piece of science fiction that shows a genuinely optimistic future, not secretly dystopian underneath a shiny surface, not utopian until the plot starts and everything falls apart. Actually, straightforwardly optimistic. Struggling, most people do. And that's not an accident. It's a pattern baked so deep into the genre that we've stopped noticing it. Terminator, The Matrix, Blade Runner, Black Mirror, The Hunger Games, The Handmaid's Tale. Even Star Trek's more recent films have quietly dialed down the utopian optimism the franchise built its name on. Science fiction, as a genre, has overwhelmingly picked a side. Worth asking why, and what we lose by only telling one kind of story about tomorrow. Dystopia wins for a genuinely simple structural reason. It comes with built-in drama. A broken society hands you a plot for free. Someone is oppressed, someone resists, someone uncovers the truth. The conflict is already sitting there in the premise, which is exactly why dystopia has been the dominant mode of speculative fiction for the better part of a century. There's a second, quieter reason too. Pessimism just sounds smarter. Pointing out everything that could go wrong reads as rigorous and clear-eyed. Optimism, by contrast, risks sounding naive. That's a bias, not a fact about the world, but it shapes which stories get told and which ones get taken seriously, and dystopia genuinely earns its place doing something useful. Warning. 1984 wasn't trying to predict 2026, it was trying to stop something. The best dystopian fiction functions as an early warning system, dramatising a bad trend before it fully arrives, so audiences recognise it coming. Utopia, meanwhile, runs into the opposite problem. It's structurally short on conflict, and writers have spent a century inventing workarounds for that. If a society has already solved its major problems, where does the story come from? Writers have landed on roughly 3 tricks. Add a romance plot, running alongside the world building. Set the story at the very edge of the utopia rather than its comfortable centre, which is exactly what both Star Trek and Iain M. Banks' culture novels do, sending their characters out to the frontier rather than dwelling in the finished, functioning core. Or introduce a threat from outside the utopia, since the utopia itself won't generate one internally. Even then, utopian fiction has an honesty problem baked into it, and the sharpest version of that critique comes from Ursula K. Le Guin's short story, The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, a flawless, joyful city whose perfection depends entirely on the suffering of a single locked-away child. And the story's real question isn't whether the city is happy, it's what you do once you learn the price of that happiness. It's not a coincidence how often this shows up across the genre in other forms. H. G. Wells' Time Machine has a beautiful surface society sustained by an enslaved one underground, and Wall-E puts a full-service utopian cruise ship in orbit around a dead Earth. Utopia, written honestly, keeps confessing that it's hiding something. Go looking for a genuine screen utopia beyond Star Trek, and this problem gets even clearer. Search for utopian sci-fi films, and you'll find lists padded out with titles that don't actually hold up. Logan's Run, everyone lives in blissful comfort and gets executed the moment they turn 30. Demolition Man, a spotless crime-free future that's really a satire about sterile over-control. Gattaca, genetic perfection, built on crushing anyone who doesn't have it. Elysium, a literal orbiting paradise that only exists because almost everyone else is locked out of it. One critic reviewing the genre put it bluntly, it's genuinely difficult to find a science fiction film you could honestly call optimistic. Nearly every utopia the genre offers is a dystopia wearing better lighting. There's one real exception worth naming, Tomorrowland from 2015. It's a mainstream studio film that's sincerely, unironically hopeful about the future, and that wasn't an accident. Writer Damon Lindelof has said directly that it was made as a deliberate response to the genre's dystopian dominance, a conscious attempt to put a hopeful vision back on screen. It's less proof that utopias are common than proof of exactly how rare and deliberate you have to be to make one that actually holds together. So maybe the real question isn't dystopia or utopia. Maybe the most interesting science fiction has quietly been doing something else. Think about a future where humanity has fusion drives, terraforming, genuine interplanetary civilization, and the actual politics hasn't been fixed at all. That's the Expanse. Centuries of technological progress, and Earth and Mars still behave like 2 rival superpowers jockeying for resources, while the belt is a genuinely exploited underclass, producing exactly what you'd expect an exploited underclass to produce: real reform movements sitting alongside real terrorism and radicalization. Nobody solved human nature just because the ships got faster. Critics regularly compare its politics to something like House of Cards, just relocated off-world, and that comparison is the whole point. It's not a warning, and it's not a dream. It's just us, with better tools, still arguing. The Alien franchise runs the same experiment with a different institution. Swap out governments and extremists for a mega-corporation, and the effect is identical. Weyland-Yutani has starships, synthetic humans, and interstellar commerce, and it treats the crew of the Nostromo as expendable, blue-collar labour, space truckers, in Ridley Scott's own words, sent to investigate a distress beacon under a company directive that says it plainly: crew expendable, priority one is returning the organism for analysis. That's not a warning about the future of corporate power. It's just current corporate incentives, unchanged, with better ships. You can see the same instinct even inside Star Trek's own universe once you look past its reputation. Deep Space Nine spent years deliberately picking at the Federation's utopian surface, a station on the edge of a war zone, characters making genuinely compromised choices, an in-universe episode that explicitly shows how ugly the Utopia's own history actually was. The franchise most associated with pure optimism produced its most respected series by refusing to leave that optimism unexamined. This third mode is arguably the truest one, because it's closest to how change in the real world actually happens. Progress doesn't arrive as a clean utopian leap, and collapse doesn't arrive as a clean dystopian collapse either. It arrives messy, genuinely better in some ways, genuinely worse in others, uneven, contested, argued over as it happens. A story willing to hold both of those truths at once, instead of picking a side before the plot even starts, tends to say something more honest about the future than either the warning or the dream does on its own. Dystopia tells us what to fear. Utopia tells us what to want. The stories brave enough to sit in the uncomfortable space between the two, genuinely mixed, genuinely uncertain, might be the ones actually telling us the truth. If this made you think, hit like, it helps. Subscribe for a new video every Wednesday. Out there is exactly where we're going.